So on the left and right on his webcam, we have Norman. He has over 25 years of CEO and senior sales management experience. He's worked with clients in a wide range of industries, including financial services, healthcare technology, manufacturing, and distribution. Before SRG, Norman served as president and CEO of Catapult Inc., a leading provider of personal computer training services, where he oversaw operations and managed growth before the company's acquisition by IBM. Then on the right side on this slide, we have David, and live on his webcam, David helps large B2B sales organizations improve sales performance. Previously, David was a principal at Linear Partners, a sales consulting firm providing sales strategy, sales operation, talent management, and interim management services to emerging growth companies. In the past, David has served as Vice President of Business Affairs of Silo, where he was responsible for the company's business development, sales operations, legal affairs, and financial activities. Norman and Ray, I'll let you take it from here.
All right, Alonso, thank you very much. Just a pleasure to be here and have so many people joining us today. I'm really delighted to have David here as well. David is a managing director and oversees instructional design and development, and has been really instrumental in developing solutions that are highly responsible to the changing environment we're finding ourselves in with the COVID-19 crisis and pandemic. So David, welcome.
Thanks, Norm. I'm excited to be here today.
Right, and we'll just start with just one quick slide just to kind of frame things a little bit about Sales Readiness Group, and then we want to get right into the agenda. Dave, I'll let you get us started here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for those of you who don't know about Sales Readiness Group, SRG, we're a sales training company. And really, with respect to today's webinar, what's important is that we've been developing and delivering live virtual training sessions since 2010. And obviously, live virtual and anything virtual in the training realm is a really important topic today, given the new normal that we're in. And we've delivered thousands of sessions. We also have extensive experience using e-learning. So what we wanted to do today is really talk about a new product that we've developed that's really been in response to a lot of client demand that we've had, which is really how to enable the managers using these new virtual tools to deliver training to their teams.
Great, Dave, thank you. Really excited again to have so many people join us today. Just quickly to cover our agenda, we want to cover the sales manager's role in developing their teams. Some of the most important selling skills during the new normal, so that's changed a little bit. Almost every team is now selling remotely, and that means those teams that were used to accessing their customers in person. Also, we'll talk a lot about a lot of the other challenges associated with that. As David was just mentioning, leveraging the benefits of virtual sales training, and by virtual we mean e-learning and virtual training on Zoom or other platforms. Some really great techniques to maximize participant engagement. As Alonso was saying, even on a product showcase like today, we want to get everyone very involved and really hear your thoughts. So encouraging engagement and collaboration. And then just share with you some thoughts about how companies are using virtual training based on a couple of examples we have to share with you today. So with that, I really want to get everyone involved here. Let's just pose a quick question, Dave, and you can answer this one in the chat pod. We're really curious, what sales challenges are you or your teams facing during the COVID pandemic? So if you would just use the chat pod, we'd love to kind of just understand some of the challenges you're facing. I mentioned certainly selling remotely, gaining access to people. Dave, some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, those are things we hear a lot. I think we have clients where they're just not used to selling in a virtual world. I mean, we have, really our world is dividing into two camps. One camp, they're very comfortable using Zoom and other technologies, a lot of tech companies. Then we have clients that, hey, they're doing face-to-face selling. And for those clients, it's a real challenge.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some great comments here. I think Jesse mentioned here, and they're scrolling a little bit in front of me, so I'm going to lean towards the screen, but keeping salespeople engaged, gaining access, changes in budget, very real, staying in front of our clients and sharing our insights virtually. A resistance to change, I'm assuming maybe on the part of the sales team, maybe on the part of the customers. Cold calls aren't working, getting access.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
That's
Dave.
an interesting one. I mean, we hear that too, that, particularly in the beginning, cold calls just were a complete waste of time. You couldn't get through to anyone.
Right. I think this other one was really interesting too. Getting higher. I think in the target organization, as budgets are changing and priorities are changing, and I can see it even in many of the opportunities in our own pipeline at Sales Readiness Group, we are gaining access to higher level decision makers, and that's really important in terms of advancing those opportunities. So thank you all for sharing, and I know there's more comments here. We'll certainly look at those. Want to transition and really talk about the sales manager's role in developing their teams. And, David, I think when we start here, maybe just at a high level, just some of the benefits of skills development, and then, specifically why we're suggesting that sales managers play such a prominent role right now.
Yeah, I mean, some of these should be familiar, but just, from our perspective, we think that selling skills, with better selling skills, particularly in this environment, you're going to have a better ramp up time, obviously improve productivity. A big one is sales pipeline, which is clearly a problem that we saw in the chat. Sales velocity, right? Pipeline velocity rather, improved win rates and avoiding discounting. I mean, those are all kind of the common themes that we see, and really the benefits of improved selling skills.
Absolutely. And I think you're spot on. The two that we're seeing really right now have to do with pipeline. The pipeline for many companies, the reality is that pipeline has shrunk and deals are frozen or stalled. So the velocity of the pipeline has gone down. Has a lot of implications also in terms of adding new client acquisition, new customer acquisition to grow the sales pipeline. So a lot of reasons to train, not just during the pandemic, but just generally why better selling skills leads to better results. So thank you. Next thought, is really, well, what's going on now? And I know, Dave, this is a slide that you've spent a lot of time thinking about, and I think it just kind of captures where we are.
I mean, in the world that we're living in now, instructor-led training, or think about traditional classroom-based training, it's really not an option now. And probably won't be an option, at least in the near term. And that's just the reality. I mean, we have a technology client that have canceled all of travel through 2021. And that may be extreme and I can't predict the future, but from a training perspective, we do believe that traditional in-person training really isn't going to be viable in the current environment that we're in. And even things like sales conferences and the traditional annual sales kickoff that you would have in January or February, or maybe a quarterly meeting, those things just aren't happening. So from a training perspective, you're really left with, on-demand, live virtual or virtual instructor-led training, or some blend. And we're going to talk about all of these, different training modalities. As a sales manager, ultimately, you're responsible for the productivity of your team, and ultimately that includes both coaching and training. So while a lot of the managers work at companies with in-house training departments, particularly in today's environment, ultimately it's the manager's responsibility to develop their team members.
Absolutely. And I think with traditional instructor-led training being off the table, this really creates an opportunity for managers to also better engage with remote teams. And, if we think about selling skills, we do think that right now they're more important than ever. And, some of the ideas are, as I mentioned earlier, the pipelines have shrunk, deals are being stalled, there may be budget issues. I think there's a couple other things going on. I think that sales reps, who think about when the COVID pandemic really started to hit in the March timeline, January and February were outstanding. And even, going into last year, the end of 2019, it was a really robust economy. So salespeople didn't have to do a lot of prospecting. They were really reliant on their existing customers. And so I think for that reason, now we're in a position where skills they may not have used for a period of time, and the challenge of trying to use those skills in a remote environment are really going to be very important. It's also just challenging to access decision makers. And I think, as someone noted in our chat, we also need to probably go and sell a little bit deeper and higher within those accounts. So that's why we think selling skills, I mean, when you're just writing orders, selling skills aren't that important, but in today's environment, we've got to get really good at how we sell. So with that, let's just transition to our next topic, which is, what are the most important selling skills during the new normal? And as David was saying, we can't predict the future, but we think that this is going to go on for a while. That's kind of what we're hearing. And we don't see, you know, kind of the face-to-face selling taking place all that quickly. So again, I want to just kind of invite everyone here to kind of share your thoughts, and would love to hear, before we kind of share our thoughts, you know, what skills are most important for your teams right now. So what are some of the selling skills you think are going to be most important for your team as we prepare for a rebound and kind of during this new normal period?
Yeah, so just please type into the chat box. I'm very curious, Norm, to see what our audience says today.
Okay, I'm seeing a lot of them.
Storytelling, yes, interesting. Retooling presentation skills. That's a very interesting one, Norm. On
I think
how to
both
go
of those
from
are. I think storytelling
Yeah.
is a way, when you're selling virtual, to capture someone's attention. People relate to a story, and so if there's a theme, retooling presentation skills, if you were presenting in person and now you're presenting virtually, a lot of differences there. You may or may not have, you know, access to everyone's kind of body language, or even, you know, the contact.
Yeah, I like Stevens, by the way, how to come up with the most creative Zoom background. I don't do that, but I know a lot of my colleagues do. This is a really good one from Robert: relationship building with empathy. I mean, certain core skills really don't change whether you're doing it in person or virtually, and we'll talk about relationship building soon.
Yeah, I think also customer engagement. We want to make sure those customers are engaged. You're not just presenting on Zoom or Teams or something, and just also it's Jose, I think, put, you know, resilience, creativity, and adaptability. Obviously, resilience and creativity, always great skills for you know, sales professionals. Adaptability, really important. We're in a new environment. We can't change everything that's happening around us. So what are we going to do to adapt?
Yeah.
And there are going to be setbacks. I mean, I think it's very real that customers may not have the same budgets they did before. And in addition to that, their priorities may be changing. So just a lot of things to adapt to. Thank you very much. Dave?
Yeah, and I just want to add one point, which is, you know, when it comes to creativity, we have one salesperson in our organization, and he runs a virtual happy hour, you know, every other week. And, you know, the idea there is to get some of his clients together and prospects and really talk about some of the problems that they're having, and do it really in a non-salesy way. So there's just, you know, a lot of creativity going on now in terms of how to re-engineer how you sell. Some of the core skills don't change, but just getting creative to get people to show up to your Zoom meetings is really critical.
So this is great. It reminds me, Dave, of some research we did a couple of years ago that I think we'd asked sales teams about what, from the salesperson's perspective, what skills are going to be most important. And do you want to just comment on what skills they identified, and particularly why we've you know, highlighted the ones we have from this list? So they're all really important skills, but go ahead.
Yeah, so this is research that we did together with the training industry, where we talked to real sales professionals and we asked them, you know, stack rank, what are the skills that you think are going to be the most important for your career going forward? And you can kind of see the stack ranking. And Norm, we highlighted a couple of skills. You know, look, they're all important, right? And these are all kind of key skills throughout the sales cycle and account management, and these are all important. We highlighted, kind of in the new normal that we're in, some of the skills. It doesn't mean that you can ignore the other ones, but some of the things that we think are of particular interest now. And building relationships, you know, by far and away is, you know, the most important skill in any sales environment. It came up in the chat that we just did, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Prospecting as well. I mean, pipelines are under a massive amount of pressure, you know, in the current economy that we're in, and everyone's thinking about how to grow their pipelines. Qualification and qualifying, you know, a lot of deals are stalling out in the pipelines, and kind of having a renewed sense of pipeline management and rigor in which you apply your pipeline management criteria. It's important, because you have to have a clean pipe before you understand what kind of prospecting you need to do. And that also goes hand in hand with just overall better pipeline management. So those are some of the, so those are some of the things that we thought were important. And Norm, do you think we're missing anything on this list here?
Well, I think if you look at the total list, I mean, when I think about, kind of the essence of selling, I always think about, building that relationship, identifying what a customer's needs are, making sure that we really clearly understand and they articulate their needs, and obviously presenting a solution that's very relevant and aligns with the needs. But I think these four in particular, as you mentioned, are really important now, beginning with relationships. And I'll comment a little bit more on that, but I also want to just comment briefly on the prospecting and the qualification. The prospecting, again, I mentioned earlier that salespeople have a tendency in a strong economy to get overly reliant on their key customers. Those key customers may be spending less, so we need to prospect into new accounts, and there may also be opportunities to go deeper into existing accounts. So just prospecting in terms of new account acquisition and also going deeper and wider within existing accounts. And then the qualification really ties to the opportunities in the pipeline may be stalled or moving slower, and just re-qualifying those deals in terms of budget, authority, someone to mention earlier, selling higher within organizations, timing, and also just, in terms of the overall business need may have shifted some. I did want to come back to relationships for a minute, because in our model here, and this is a model we use as part of our training, where salespeople are really focused on aligning their sales process with how customers purchase. And building that relationship is kind of the essence of the model that we want to create. And by building relationship, we're not just talking about rapport. And, likability is important, but we're talking about creating value at every stage of the process and using that relationship as ability to gain access. And so we think this underpinning of building relationships has always been important, but we think right now it's especially important, particularly in the openness stage. In other words, building that relationship is really important to gaining access. And so some of those ideas that you were mentioning, Dave, one of our, sales professional uses, and going back to Jose's point about creativity, are really important in terms of the essence of relationship building and kind of being an underpinning for the general sales model, but particularly important right now as we move forward.
Right, I totally agree with that. And I think that, one of the challenges that I think a lot of salespeople have is they're thrown for a loop in this new normal of how to build relationships. And right, for them, it's, yeah, go ahead, Norm.
No, go ahead. I want to hear what you had to say on that.
Well, I was just going to make a quick point that the concepts, that when we, talk to our clients, the key relationship building concepts really haven't changed. Doing things virtually adds a new twist, but those concepts haven't changed. So I think it's really more about getting your salespeople out of their comfort zone. So if they're used to just dropping in, like say you're doing medical sales, you're in pharma, and you're used to dropping into the doctor's office, how you go about building a relationship is going to change radically. And you really have to come up with ways to, not just schmooze with a healthcare provider, but maybe provide more expertise, give them a reason to show up to your meeting.
But I think that's a key point. I think that sometimes when people think about relationship, they think about rapport and likability, and certainly having a good rapport and likability is important, but there's two other fundamental elements of relationships, and those are trust, so making sure that you've established trust, following through on what you're saying you're going to do. If there are things that occur that where there are mistakes along the way, making sure you're being proactive in addressing those. So the concept of building trust, and then the other concept you mentioned, David, also of demonstrating expertise. So think about relationships in terms of not only rapport, and rapport and likability, but also establishing trust and demonstrating expertise. So with that, let's move to our next topic, which is, well, we are in this new normal. How are we going to leverage the benefits of virtual training? And I want to talk just a little bit about, what are those benefits? And Dave, I know you've done a lot of work on this and you're building it into our programs that we're running with our clients, but high level, just, benefits of virtual sales training.
Well, I think a lot of these are familiar, speed, scalability, accessibility, it could be accessible 24/7. You can make it ongoing if you have, reinforcement, microlearning videos. It can be extremely flexible. I think the most important benefit that's really overlooked by a lot of people is this idea of collaboration, which is using virtual technology to have the sales team collaborate with each other. We're going to talk about what that looks like from a training point of view, but from the role of the sales manager as both a trainer, a coach, and a manager, training gives you an opportunity to work with your team, to build a relationship with your team, and to kind of observe them in action. And for me, the most, that's one of the key benefits of virtual training, which is the ability to collaborate with your team.
So I really like the next chart. It's kind of a great schematic, and particularly in an environment where traditional classroom training is on the table, kind of just explains how you could build a overall blended program that has that collaboration. And Dave, do you want to just kind of explain kind of the schematic here and the combination of various elements?
Yeah, I mean, so when I talk about collaboration, let me just kind of walk you through what I mean. So in the context of a blended learning solution, one way that, in some of the programs that we use, we'll start with micro-learning lessons. So if you're going to have a module on prospecting, you may have 4 or 5 videos on how to prospect. You may give your team then fieldwork assignments, create a script, create an impact benefit statement, practice it with a coworker, et cetera. You then would follow up maybe with during your weekly sales meeting, doing it virtually, particularly today. And you would have some kind of skill application practice session where you have people maybe using breakout rooms or maybe kind of in a group setting, practice their prospecting. You want to have tools and resources for more of in-the-moment support, and maybe some kind of knowledge check. Some people want that. So we're rolling out a training program today for a large technology company that has all of these elements. They also have badges when you complete each module, and a knowledge check and a certification. So these are all the elements that we would recommend in a comprehensive program. But to me, what really holds kind of a virtual program together is really that periodic check-in that in the situation that we're talking about, the manager would have with his or her team, and they're practicing together. And I think that provides kind of the human engagement element that if you just had one of these elements standing alone, like just, hey, watch these videos, maybe it wouldn't be as effective. But having that human intervention where humans can engage with each other in practice, that really kind of amplifies learning.
Yeah, we see this in customer programs. In fact, we even see it internally. We're running this exact kind of training for our team at SRG, just like to refresh on skills. And we're beginning with the micro-learning. The micro-learning has a couple of fieldwork assignments. They apply what they've done. Then we have like a weekly meeting where we're reviewing what we went over and have some training exercises. So our model really is built around learn, apply, adopt, and that's where the tools and resources come in. So really a nice model. Again, this can all be done without instructor-led training. And just to be clear, we're huge fans of instructor-led training. Historically, that's been a primary delivery method for us and many of our clients. But an environment where that's not on the table right now, we think this does a really good job of getting people involved. And it's that peer-to-peer learning and that discussion that's occurring during those weekly skill application sessions that's really bringing that training to life. And we're able to actually to strategize quite a bit.
Right, and hey, Jose's asking a question in the Q&A about what's a good length for micro-learning videos. And I would, my experience has been that when you get past about 5 minutes, you really start losing people's attention. It becomes really hard to watch. So I've seen, training videos that go on well past 30 minutes. And maybe for some topics, that's fine. But I think in the realm of selling skills, boy, once you get past 4 or 5 minutes, I mean, they call it micro for a reason. I think you're really pushing the envelope in terms of people's attention.
Ryan, let me just kind of add to that. In terms of micro-learning, I think that kind of 3 to 5 minute is ideal, but many topics cannot be covered in 3 to 5 minutes. For example, if you think about developing needs, that may be 20 minutes of content, but that could be broken into 4 or 5 micro-learning. So we're not suggesting that you would cover a whole topic like prospecting in 2 to 5 minutes. As David was saying earlier, might be a series of 3 or 4 micro-learnings on prospecting. Call planning might be another 4 or 5 micro-learnings, developing needs. So again, we like the idea of chunking them out and having mini exercises. It's a way to get really good compliance and also really cuts down. I think one of the biggest challenges to microlearning has been people kind of abandoning. Maybe they got a call, maybe they got pulled away, maybe they had an email they had to respond to. So in addition to short attention spans, it also just fits well in terms of people's workflow. Great question. Dave, anything else you're seeing on the questions you think we should respond to before we go a little bit deeper?
Here's a great, Margaret asked a really nice follow-up question, which is what length do you recommend for a VILT session? Excellent question. So here's my point of view on that. If you're talking about just VILT, where that's your primary training modality, in other words, there's no expectation that you're going to watch a bunch of videos or do any field work prior to the session, 45 to 60 minutes is a nice length. Remember, by the time people get logged in, they figure out how to use their webcams, you can chew up a little bit of time in the beginning. But 45 minutes to 60 minutes, and maybe we've done sessions 90 minutes to 2 hours. It depends on the complexity. If the session's going to be used to focus on one specific skill, I'd probably keep it short, 15 minutes to 30 minutes. But if it's a general training where, hey, we're going to this week talk about not one part of prospecting, but maybe the entire topic of prospecting, 60 minutes to 90 minutes would feel really, really comfortable. I think once you start going beyond that time frame, people get a little bit of, they get fidgety. It's harder to budget the time on their schedules. So anyway, that's just been our experience.
Yeah, and I think another dependency there would be group size. I think if the group size is small, you could probably go a little bit longer. You're going to have a lot of collaboration. You could probably go a lot bit deeper. If it's going to be a little bit more what I'll call almost webinar style training, which we don't advocate, but basically training large groups. Again, to David's point, if VLT is your primary mode of delivery, if it's following the microlearning, again, I agree, keeping them really short is crucial. Great questions. If there are others, we'll try and also respond to those.
Yeah, and hey, just remember, and Judy's making a point that she has 2.5 hour sessions, but have 15-minute breaks. And look at if that works for your group and the content that you're delivering, that's great. For salespeople in general, now I'm going to generalize, they tend to have shorter attention spans. Mm-hmm. So all other things being equal, I would err on the side of shorter.
Yeah, and Judy, I think the point Judy's making is, even when we deliver a global program where VILT is the primary mode of delivery, we quite often go 2-hour sessions. I'll be showing a chart later that shows kind of a program developed, that could be taught as 6 2-hour sessions. I think given that you're giving people a break and you've got a group size of 10 people, nice, you keep everyone engaged, you're giving them a break. I think that works really well. So thanks for sharing that, Judy. Okay. So the goal of all this was we want to maximize participant engagement. People learn when they're involved. And here are some of the keys we found high level for maximizing participant engagement. Executive sponsorship. If you have buy-in from your sales leaders, your VP of sales, your sales enablement leaders, your learning and development leaders, it becomes a lot stronger. It really creates that culture. The weekly microlearning we found is a really great way to, used to use the term a lot, kind of flip the classroom, where you've got that microlearning take place in advance of your skill application sessions. You can also use microlearning to reinforce training. So we see benefits kind of before and after, and we use it both ways in many of the programs we run. Fieldwork assignments are critical. If you're going to have, some skill application sessions, you can have some fieldwork assigned in advance. It gives you something that people can prepare and talk about. They apply what they learned. We've also learned to keep that field work pretty short. It shouldn't take someone more than 15 to 20 minutes to complete an exercise. We want to have really high completion rates. The skill application sessions so people can share and collaborate. And that's what allows for that peer-to-peer learning. I was on one yesterday, and just great ideas where people were saying, hey, I'm not getting access to someone, or I was receiving, we're actually covering objection handling yesterday, and we're going through top objections. And, from a textbook answer, we had some answers, but salespeople had really practical answers, how they're responding to those objections. And they were able to actually apply the model we were using to those objections. And then having those tools and job aids, so it's not just something that's in the classroom, but something they can use from a real world standpoint. So these are some of the areas we found that really drive that engagement that we try and design into programs. And we would encourage everyone to really think about some, if not all of these. Dave, any additional thoughts you'd add on
Well,
engagement?
yeah, in the Q&A, Sanjeev is asking, the most important question, how do you engage your participants? So I would probably summarize it. It's really simple. You have to get your salespeople to do something during the training. They can't just be sitting there passively listening to you if you're a manager and say you're running some kind of training, weekly training or whatever the cadence is. If they're not doing anything and they're just being passive, they're going to get bored very quickly. So all of the things you listed here, particularly field work and skill application sessions and peer-to-peer learning, you have to design your training in a way that really encourages them to do something. And when you do that, you're going to get a great outcome.
It reminds me of two famous comments. I think one was from, I'll attribute to ATD, which is telling is not training. So if it's not interactive, people aren't going to really learn. They're going to just kind of listen and then probably forget over time. So the other key point is when we think about the fundamentals of adult learning theory, and there's probably a lot of people who are joining us today who know more than I do about adult learning theory, but an essential element of adult learning theory is adults learn best by doing. So making sure we have the field work and the skill application is really important. That's how adults learn best. So I want to share a couple examples of companies that we've recently worked with. David, I think you mentioned we just launched a really large deployment today with a company for 200 learners. We're going to use blended learning, a lot of e-learning, a lot of collaboration, cohort sessions. And I'll just speak to two other quick examples. These are both, with the client's approval. They're actually success profiles that exist on our website. One is ABM, which is a leader in building supplies and building maintenance. And they, really shifted their program to e-learning, where there was a micro-learning that was taking place, and then weekly cohort sessions. And when you think about executive involvement, I mean, the president of sales and the divisional VPs actually sat in on some of the sessions. So there was really great sponsorship. I had the pleasure of actually leading a couple of the sessions, really great interaction. We had people from, various different regions, people from different business lines actually all engaging together as we went through this program. The other one I'll mention is GoodPack. GoodPack's a leader in supply chain management, and they use these really innovative containers to ship products globally. It was a global initiative. They had sales teams in virtually every geography across the world. They wanted to train all these teams. They had issues, of course, with time zones, and we were able to work with them on a program where, again, we used the micro-learning as the base content, and then we had weekly cohort sessions, typically done by region. Once in a while, we'd have to combine a couple of regions if there was just 2 or 3 sellers, and we were able to launch that as a very effective program. There was field work, there were e-tools that were involved, and so we're able to get a lot of collaboration. If you would like to learn more about those, you can go to our website, or if we send you out this deck, I think these are hyperlinks that Alonzo put in that just give you an idea of what other clients are doing as they respond. And as David mentioned earlier, these particularly play well during an environment where instructor-led training isn't feasible, but we've actually been delivering these kind of solutions for many, many years for clients who just didn't have the budget or necessarily the time to pull their teams together. So with that, Dave, I want to talk about some work, or maybe have you talk about some work you've recently done to kind of package this up in a way that it really works well for global teams in terms of the virtual sales training accelerator. So let me turn it to you to kind of introduce that program.
Yeah, so we develop virtual programs for very, very large companies. We've worked with, everything from very, very global companies to small companies. And what we wanted to do is take some of the common building blocks that we would do for a very, very large company and make those building blocks available really to anybody. So we have some clients that, hey, maybe one division within a large company, they just want to do some training for one group. And we have other companies that need everything customized. And one of the key elements of our training accelerator, Norma, if you just so what we do is we're starting with our core comprehensive selling skills content, which is a skills-based curriculum that's a consultative approach to selling. And we have a flipped classroom kind of training methodology here which is we're starting with micro videos that we'd want that people watch. And then the idea is that every week they get together, and what we want to do is give the manager the tools that he or she needs to run that training. It doesn't have to be the manager, but what we're doing is trying to make it as simple as possible. So the idea here is that you would do 1 or 2 modules per week. You would get your team together every week during your normal sales meeting. And then we give the manager really a training guide on how to run a very, very simple weekly training event. And these tools have been used by a lot of different companies, but the idea is that they're simple to use, the skills are very powerful, and we think relevant. And then the idea is that it's a really easy way for companies and training organizations to have an effective blended training program.
And I think the reason we mentioned the sales manager is we know that the sales manager is probably connecting with their team virtually, maybe for a 1 hour or 90-minute sales meeting once a week. And we're suggesting maybe dedicating 15 minutes of that sales meeting to training, where they could maybe recap 1 or 2 of the videos, go through the exercises, maybe even have someone from their team kind of take the lead and co-leading that session with them, just creating a very collaborative learning environment. David mentioned the base curriculum. We think this program obviously works. If companies have their own curriculum, they could certainly, create their own videos. But the program that we've built really builds around our curriculum, which is divided into 6 lessons: prospecting, planning the call, developing needs. Again, I think probably the most essential skill is really understanding clients' needs and getting them to articulate those needs, presenting solutions that are relevant. Section I mentioned that we were covering yesterday on managing feedback, not only objection handling, but positive feedback, and gaining commitment. I think when I think about some of the questions that came up a few minutes ago, I think to Judy's point, if we were training these as just purely in virtual instructor-led training, these would look more like 2-hour sessions. In the flipped classroom, almost every one of these check marks becomes a micro-learning. And so you could go through them 1 at a time, or I've actually been going through a sales team right now where we're doing about 3 videos a week and then taking about 30 minutes to use the playbook to apply the exercises. This just gives you a sense of what kind of like a core curriculum would look like covering selling skills. And then we pull it all together, as David mentioned, in a really nice platform. So it's easy to access the videos, the job aids, the participant workbook. It's all in a portal. The assignments are clearly called out when there is an assignment. They're easy to access. And so a team can kind of work through, if I just go back for a minute, work through one area at a time. Manager could assign what they want them to do. We generally recommend 6 or 7 weeks going through the materials. And then there's a manager playbook that I'm asked David to speak to that is really the newest addition. So we've had this on-demand piece for some period of time. We've been using it in a lot of different ways, but this idea of just, David, that you came up with combining with the playbook, I think is really creative and brings it to life. Maybe we can just share a little bit about the playbook piece.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the missing link has always been, hey, you have the sales manager engaging with their team, generally in a weekly meeting anyway. And, we heard from a lot of our clients, hey, they want to do some kind of training event. They don't want it to dominate the entire call. So we developed 15-minute training events, scripting them out, and really creating a facilitator guide for the manager. So you don't need to be a trained facilitator to deliver this content. And the idea is really to just spell it out for the manager so that he or she can deliver a really quick 15-minute training event every week if that's the cadence that they want. And we wanted to make it simple to use, and that's really the key. Because ultimately, it's that human engagement that makes the training come to life. And it can't just be watching a bunch of videos. So when you include the manager getting involved in training their team, that's when we think, you get much better outcomes.
Absolutely. And I think, question came up before, does this really replace the traditional training workshops that, maybe sales enablement or learning and development? No, but we think it's highly responsive to the needs today where teams are working remotely. And particularly in this, as we respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, we're looking for a way for managers to connect with their team and really to build those better skills that are going to be so important right now. And just from an affordability standpoint, I'll put the pricing on the screen. we're offering the on-demand as a 1-year subscription. Manager's Playbook is included on orders of 5 or more, trying to make sure everything that a manager needs. So, normally we don't put a lot of pricing on a, on something like this, but we just wanted, we knew the question was going to come up, so just wanted to kind of share that with you. And with that, Alonzo, let me turn it back to you if there's any questions we missed or any thoughts you want to share with the team.
Yeah, if you move to the next slide, thank you, Norman. So for those who are still here with us, we wanted to facilitate continuing this conversation. If you're interested in bringing this, bringing this program to improve the sales performance of your organization right now, all you have to do is type 1 in the chat, and I will make sure to look at the chat notes and set you up with a zero pressure consultation with one of our sales training specialists. And this will be a great opportunity to have someone to think through to see if this is a good fit or not for your organization, or if there may be another program that may be a better fit. Now, another reason you may want to schedule a consultation is because we are living the product of our training, and I already see some of you signing up for a consultation. But as I was saying, one of the reasons that I also like people to really start a conversation with us on our training programs is because we do live the product of our training. So talking to our salespersons is also a great way to see the product of our product, seeing the curriculum live as you have the conversations with our salespeople. Again, we appreciate all of you for being here with us today. And with that said, Norman, David, thank you so much for the program demo. It was very helpful. Looks like we are finishing a little early today. I don't see any questions and answers. Again, if some of you have any questions, you can also contact us info@salesreadinessgroup.com if you prefer having this conversation via email. And at the end of this presentation, when we wrap up the webinar, we're going to have a survey show up. And we highly appreciate if you can submit some of the feedback as we continue this webinar series to serve you. David, Norman, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.